Hello, YouTube. I need to come up with a better intro than just hello, YouTube. But I have a recording buddy today. The Teddy. Say hi, Teddy. He's so cute. Anyway, so this is going to be my third VBAC, the story of my third VBAC, which I've tried to record this a couple of times, but like I had an MRI the other day and I tried to record, but my phone was acting up. I couldn't even get the camera to come up or anything. Look at you. You're such a happy boy. You're a happy boy. You're a happy boy. Yeah. He's so sweet. Anyway, so this is actually going to be talking about my pregnancy with him. And I'm probably going to do it in two parts because my pregnancy with him is a little bit more vivid in my mind. And I can recall a lot more details. And my pregnancy with him was a little bit more of a roller coaster than it was with the other ones. So I'll get started at the beginning. I, of course, I'd had the early miscarriages before Daphne, and so I had to be on supplements, progesterone supplements, while I was pregnant, and I had the progesterone supplements, you know, on hand in the event I had gotten pregnant, and I generally tried to keep track of my cycles and whatnot. And it was coming up to Thomas's birthday, and some friends of ours gave us a gift card to a restaurant and bought a night at a local hotel for us and watched the kids. So I did the math and I'm like, well, my period's supposed to be starting around when we're supposed to have a night in the hotel, and I'm like, I can't be having that happening. So I counted and I'm like, well, it's around time when I should be start taking progesterone anyway, and if I'm not pregnant, I'll just quit taking it and have my period, and if I am, I'll just keep taking it. So his birthday came, and then he was heading back to work the next day, and I was one of those closet testers because Thomas was always kind of a little bit hands-off with trying to conceive, and can I ask that? No. Here. You're so cute. So anyway, so I was taking the progesterone, and he, you know, our date night came and went, and he was going back to work the next day. So this was the day after his birthday. And I took a test, and it was positive, and I was like, no way. So I took several more tests, and they were all positive. And so he works like 45 minutes away from where we live, so he was still technically on his way to work. And so I sent him a picture of the digital pregnancy test that said pregnant. And when he pulled up to work, he looked at it and he was like, are you freaking kidding me? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I said the exact same thing. No way. And so that's how we found out that Teddy was coming. And so I kept taking the progesterone. Around 10 weeks, I did have some spotting, but thankfully nothing came of that. I just kept taking the progesterone. At my 12-week appointment, my doctor does, for his plus-size patients, he does the glucose test early. He does it at the 12-week appointment. If you pass it, then he does it again at like 20-some-odd weeks. I don't remember. But it's like the 24 or 28 weeks, something like that. And so anyway, I failed that test. And it took me forever before I finally went and did the 3-hour test. But I went in, finally, and did it. and I failed it too. So I definitely had gestational diabetes. Well, right off the bat, I was like, I started watching what I was eating. Your burps make me nervous, sir. He's a sweet boy. Is my finger good? Don't pull on my shirt. You. Here, look it. Look it. So I started watching with carbs because I really wanted to avoid having to do shots. Well, I was finding with diet, like I tested like different amounts of carbohydrates and stuff per meal, and I found if I stayed around 25 carbs per meal, I could keep my blood sugar fine during the day. However, my fasting blood sugar stayed elevated. So my doctor ended up putting me on insulin. And at that point also because of the I hate it when my brain fries. Oh, that's what it was. Because I was now considered high risk, I also had to see the maternal fetal medicine doctor at the hospital. So it was around that time also that I had my 20-week scan, which there's actually kind of a funny story that goes along with that. At the time, Lizzie, our oldest, was... You see yourself? Our oldest was doing an online school because she had been having trouble in public school because not only were the teachers picking, I mean the children were picking on her, but the teachers were too. And she's been diagnosed with Asperger's, but so that kind of made some things difficult. But since she was having a hard time in public school and she was in the online school, she went ahead and went with me for a few of my appointments. And so we went. Now my doctor does an ultrasound at every appointment instead of using the Doppler to look for the baby's heartbeat. He does a quick ultrasound and he, kind of looks at the fluid, baby's position, heartbeat, movement, and about 5 minutes, and that's it. So anyway, he got to looking, and I was 19, almost 20 weeks, or I was like 2 days away from being 20 weeks. And he look at you drooling, you nasty. You nasty. So anyway, I asked my doctor if he could kind of try to see. I'm like, I know there's like a lot of tissue and stuff that the ultrasound has to get through, and so your machine may not be able to see it because his machine wasn't as powerful as the ones at the hospital. So I'm like, but can you maybe try and see if you can see if the baby's a boy or a girl? And he's like, well, I'll try to look. I'll see what I can do. I'll try to look. So he tried to look, but Teddy was not cooperating so well at the time. He got to looking, and he's like, well, he says, I wouldn't go buying any clothes or anything yet, but I think it's a girl. What are you doing, boy? Too cute. Here, have that one. So, my daughter and I had decided that we were going to, on our way home, stop by the Bye Bye Baby, and we were going to do a baby registry, and then we would buy a couple of outfits. The girl, we thought it was a girl at the time, buy a couple of girl outfits. And then when we got home, we would be like, guess what it is, Daddy? And so we picked out a couple of girl outfits, and we headed home. And so I held up the outfits, and I'm like, guess what? And he goes, oh, it's another girl. I was like, yeah. I said, but it's okay, you know. We were really hoping for another boy, because, you know, we already had 3 girls, and only 1 boy, and so we were hoping for another one. But, you know, as long as the baby's healthy, it's like, you know, it's all right. It's, you know, we're not totally heartbroken or anything like that. No, like, huge problem with it or anything. Just kind of like, man, I really wish it, you know, we had a boy. So it was actually the next day that I had my anatomy scan at the hospital. And so we head all the way out to Atlanta to have the anatomy scan, and the technician's like looking and everything, and she's looking at a bunch of stuff, you know, near the head and all that, and so she comes around to the bottom, and she's like, because we kept asking, you know, can you check the gender? Can you check the gender? She's like, okay, I'm heading down that way, and she went over, and Thomas and I both went, that's not a girl. And she says, nope, that is definitely a boy. And Thomas just went he just stood up and he said, yes, I did it. I finally put the stem on the apple again. And everybody was excited. Timothy was excited because he was hoping for a little brother. And then when we told him it was, you know, we think it's a girl, and he was like really disappointed and everything. And he was actually with us and stuff also. And he just had a fit. He was so excited. He was so happy. And we actually had the name Theodore picked out when I was pregnant with Daphne. So we already like, this is going to be Theodore. It's going to be our little Teddy. And so that was really funny, and that was really exciting. But then they had the maternal fetal medicine doctor come in, and she went to talking about, Bubby, you cannot have that. Hold on, you know what? There. You play some PlayStation. Shh, don't tell Daddy. So anyway, she comes in and wants to talk about the whole insulin thing and stuff, and I wasn't very happy because, you know, like I said, I was trying to avoid being on insulin and everything, and, you know, she ended up putting me on insulin anyway because of the fasting. I couldn't keep the fasting sugars down, and so that started a whole yo-yo, or maybe not a yo-yo, but more like tornado, a storm, whatever, crap storm, whatever you want to call it. And so they kept, or she kept upping the insulin that I was on. And I for the life of me, I don't know why my doctor couldn't override what she wanted to do. But he wasn't able to override what she wanted to do. You are slobbering all over your daddy's controller. Anyway, so, okay, no, this is no good. Let's not do this. Here, this is yours. You can chew on that. Is that not good enough for you? Okay, you can take that instead and chew on it. So what they were having me do is, I had a little booklet, and I had to write down like how many carbs I was eating per meal and what my blood sugars were 2 hours after each meal, and then my fasting blood sugar when I got up in the morning. And they were still staying high, and so they had me on. It was a long-acting insulin. And so she had told Dr. Tate to just have me keep upping it. I'd send him the numbers, up it some more. And it was every couple of days, up it some more, up it some more, up it some more. I eventually was up to 50 units by the time I was about 35 weeks or so. It was like 34 weeks. Yeah, about 34 weeks. And I was up to 50 units, but at that point, it had gotten to where I was starting to have drops and spikes. Now, this whole time I was keeping my numbers good during the day, but the long-acting insulin was so high that it was causing drops and spikes during the day, because it was a higher dose that was carrying on for longer. And so then I started getting worse off, and of course I had to keep going in for ultrasounds, for growth scans, and it finally got to a point where I was telling my doctor, I'm like, why won't this maternal fetal medicine doctor, the MFM, I'm like, why won't she let me just try metformin? I'm like, I looked at what ACOG guidelines were and all this other kind of stuff. The insulin's not working, and ACOG's suggestions are, if insulin isn't working or the patient refuses insulin, that the first course of action should be metformin. And I had been on metformin before, and she just was not having any of it. And so she just kept refusing and kept refusing and kept refusing and kept refusing. So I finally, the next time I went to, I saw Dr. Tate, and then it was like the next day or so, I was supposed to go up to the hospital for another growth scan. And he says, I want you to have them call me while you are still there. So one of the things that I had tested during that week with my numbers, and I marked it all on my book and everything, so I tried one night not taking the insulin at all. There was zero change in my fasting numbers. They were the same as they had always been. So it was showing that not only was the insulin not helping, but then it was causing problems to carry on through the day, and that really the insulin wasn't doing anything, because my numbers were the same, my fasting numbers were the same whether I took it or not. And so I finally, when I went to see her, I started explaining everything to her, and I'm like, look, I'm starting to have drops and spikes. And she says, well, I'm not seeing any drops on your records here. I said, well, that's because I was dropping between meals, and I'd have to have a snack to get my blood sugar back up, and then I have my meal, and then my blood sugar would be fine after my meal. But then shortly after that is when my blood sugar would drop again. And so she tried every scare tactic in the book. She tried everything from telling me your baby's going to die, your baby's going to be too big, all this other kind of stuff, because she just wanted me to keep going up on the insulin. And I'm like, look, the insulin's not working. And I mean, like, and at this point, Dr. Tate and I had been talking, and he's even like, and even his nurse practitioner, they're like, you know, the insulin obviously isn't working. You're up to 50 units now. And you know, they were talking about going, you know, she was talking, the MFM was talking about going up even higher than 50 units, which would be 2 needles every day, you know, like 2 needles for 1 dose. And you're a silly boy. And I'm like, dude, I'm not sticking myself twice needlessly when this isn't, you know, you're worried about my baby dying and everything, and you're not doing anything that could actually be helpful. So she finally, it wasn't, no, you know, because there was more to that whole fiasco. She kept trying to argue with me and everything. So she turned to me, she says, well, if you don't want to take the insulin, because I eventually told her, I got to a point where I was like, look, I am not going up any higher on this insulin. I'm not doing it because it's screwing me up. And I know, because she says, well, when your blood sugar's high, it gets to the baby. And I'm like, and I'm sitting here going, okay, well, when my sugar drops, the baby's affected by that too. And she says, well, ACOG recommends that we can use this one pill, but it comes with so many birth defects and blah, 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 blah. And she had named it, I don't even remember what it was called, but it was something, but I remember it was the exact same thing that was listed that ACOG said not to use. And I said, well, that's funny, because I looked it up, and it was just changed this year, earlier this year, which was, this was 2018 at the time, that they actually, I said, ACOG actually says they recommend that you don't use that particular drug because it causes problems. However, they said that the metformin should be your first line of action if the insulin isn't working or the patient refuses insulin. And she got this look on her face like, you're one of those people. Because see, another thing that was causing a problem too is because I was going really, really low carb, I was losing weight. And like not even kidding, my starting weight, like when I got pregnant, I was 267. After he was born and like the post-birth swelling and everything went down, I weighed 223. So I lost over 40 pounds, at least, while I was pregnant. And so every time I went in, I was losing more and more weight. But Dr. Tate had told me, I'm like, is this something you're concerned about? And he's like, well, as long as you're getting your calories, I'm not worried. And I said, well, trust me, I'm getting enough calories. And he's like, as long as you're getting 2,200 calories a day. I'm like, oh yeah, because for example, we would have steak night. I would have a steak like this, big old huge steak, and a gigantic salad. I counted it up one time with MyFitnessPal that meal alone was over 1,800 calories, and I was still losing weight, which is part of what's going to lead me into going into the whole realm of keto. Actually, I found out the way that I did it when I was pregnant, and the way I would do it now is called dirty keto. Anyway, that's for a different video. At any rate, I argued with her, and she's like, well, I'm going to have to talk to Dr. Tate about it. I said, actually, Dr. Tate asked for me to ask you to call him while I was still here, and for me to not leave until after he talks to you. So she kind of rolled her eyes and she walked off. So she comes back out a little while later. She's like, well, we'll agree for you to go down 10 units on the insulin and take the metformin, but I want to see your numbers. And I'm like, I'm already sending them in every week. I send Dr. Tate a picture of what those week's numbers were. And so I was like, I felt vindicated. And the funny thing about it was that night I filled that prescription. That next morning after I took the metformin, my blood sugar was perfect. Perfect. My fasting was a perfect number. And I was like, I have been saying this for weeks. Dr. Tate had been saying it for weeks, and they wouldn't let me change the treatment. And that's one of the things that makes me so mad about some of these doctors and their their fear-based practice or whatever. At that point, though, I was about 34, 35 weeks, and then I started showing protein in my urine, which that is one of the indicators of preeclampsia. And running in 24 minutes, I'm going to tell the rest of the preeclampsia story, but then I'm going to tell the birth part of the story in another video. So, the protein started showing up in my urine. Now, Dr. Tate, with his VBAC, or actually, I'm sorry, not with his VBAC patients, but with his gestational diabetes patients, starts doing weekly non-stress tests from 32 weeks on, which is, where they just strap you to the monitors and, monitor the baby's heartbeat, and then you have to press a little button every time you feel them move, and then they watch what the heartbeat does when they move and stuff. And of course, Teddy was fine the whole time, but, still had to do weekly non-stress tests. Well, I had come in for an appointment, and like I said, showed protein in my urine. And so he's like, this isn't looking very good. So he's like, well, we're going to run some blood work and do a 24-hour urine test. And so they gave me the jug and everything, and the paperwork. And thankfully, they work with a lab that has a branch in my town, so I was able to take it to that branch, so I didn't have to drive all the way to Atlanta. So I did the 24-hour urine collection, went in, they drew blood, and they called me the next day and they said, well, your protein levels, the protein levels in your urine are pretty high, and there's a couple of other numbers that look a little concerning. However, you're only 35 weeks. Anyway, so my doctor said he wanted to keep me pregnant as long as possible. So he's like, we're going to continue to do 24-hour urine tests and blood work every week. And because I wasn't quite at the point where I had preeclampsia, but it was coming up. So I did that with, I would bring in my urine test, and they could draw the blood there at Dr. Tate's office. And so he did that every week when I came in for my non-stress test. And 36-week appointment, we did all of the informed consent and all that good stuff. And so it got to where I was 37 weeks. I went in for my 37-week appointment, and those tests came back that it was getting worse, but it still wasn't quite there yet. But it was a couple of days later, I started having some chest pains. I went to the CVS that's right down the road from where I live and checked my blood pressure, and it was high. So I called Dr. Tate, and he says, well, you go ahead and go to the ER. And I said, in town or at Emory? And he says, well, I would, probably in town. I'm like, I don't really think it's all that bad. I'm like, I think I can make the drive to Emory, because if I go here in town, they're just it's not gonna matter that I've had 2 VBACs. They're gonna automatically do a C-section, and I don't trust people. I trust Dr. Tate. So I'm like, I'll be fine. I'll make it to Emory. So off to Emory we went, and the next video I will pick up from there, and that is going to that's going to be my last video with TP Fastback in the name. About a couple of days after his actual birth story is up, I will officially switch the name to VKP Media. So, alright, see you guys in the next video where we will talk about his birth. Alright, see you later. Bye.